Hello, this is Mark Wildman of Wildman Athletica, and today we are going to talk about the path of mastery. Kind of a weird thing to talk about on a fitness channel, but it's not really a fitness channel, it's a skills channel. So we're going to talk about the path to mastery. We're going to break this down into a couple of key points that you can make sure you are doing in order for you to get good at whatever you want to get good at. This doesn't necessarily have to apply to training. It can apply to anything. It could apply to piano. I don't care. It applies to basically everything all the time. So I think it's probably important to talk about. My friend's dad is a doctor, and he says it this way: see one, do one, teach one, which I think is a very elegant way to say it. I say it a different way. I say learn, teach, compete. And let's refine this idea a little bit more, because at the end of this, you will see that these two things are exactly the same thing. Whether a doctor says it or I say it, the concept is exactly the same. First thing you have to do is you have to learn something. I don't care how you learn it. If you have a coach, if you watch YouTube videos, if you read books, or if you just do. The just do is the original way that we did this. Before we had teachers and before we wrote stuff down, you just did stuff. Probably the easiest way to think about just doing as a learning pattern now is people who do mechanical stuff. People who work on dirt bikes. For the most part, they don't go to dirt bike school. They just rip apart a dirt bike engine and they put it back together. And it works or it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, they do it again, or it explodes and then they do it again. But they kind of just always do it. The way that a lot of people do training in the fitness world is they have a coach. I have an aerial coach. I have a CrossFit coach. I have a ton of different coaches. I've had sword coaches, kung fu coaches. I've actually had dirt bike coaches. You can have a coach for almost anything, and any good coach is in the middle of doing this. Once you have learned, then you can move to the teaching phase. The teaching phase is something everybody does whether they like it or not. If somebody started working on dirt bikes when they were a kid, and then when they got older, they got a job at a shop, somebody at the shop taught them things, and then eventually somebody new came into the shop and they taught the new guy things. That's just how it goes. Little bits of information are passed down through society and culture in a myriad of ways, and everybody probably ends up in the teaching phase. Most people in their life go through the learning phase and the teaching phase irregardless of their job. Very few people jump to the compete phase. The compete phase is a little bit different. The compete phase, the most basic way to think about it is you're in a non-compliant environment. A non-compliant environment could be anything. In the case of kettlebells, it could be a kettlebell competition. In the case of aerial or circus arts, which I used to do, it's performing, right? There's no competition really. It's just getting up on stage and trying not to die and just going through the process of doing that. In martial arts, this is a little bit easier to identify. It's competing against other people, whether it's in your own gym, whether it's randori, whether it is open mat. There's that competition phase in the learning process, and that happens to everybody, even people who train for classical piano. Eventually, they have to get up on stage and play it, otherwise they don't graduate, and they just don't graduate. So when you think about this, learning is probably the part that everybody's doing right now. You're watching this video, you are learning. At some point, if you are a trainer, or anything really, you are going to teach this to somebody else. Even if you are just teaching it to a friend to help them get into it, you're telling them all this stuff that you found most important. Don't drop it on your toes. Don't hit yourself in the face. If your hands rip, probably stop. All of that is teaching in small little bits, but all of knowledge has to be refined through that way. Learn, experiment, figure out what you're doing, and then pass that knowledge on. The most important part about teaching is this part. Remember what it's like to suck. This is the problem that most people have, which is why they never become like a true master, is they forget what it was like to learn. This is my greatest pet peeve when it comes to coaching. I see this all the time in the aerial circus world, is that people learned or they started ballet when they were 5. And they learned how to make lines and point their toes at an age so young They can't possibly remember the learning process. If somebody started ballet when they were 5 and they danced until they were 15, then they have 10 years of training that they just don't remember. They don't remember what they did for those 10 years because they really weren't conscious of it. Somebody else was writing that program for them. Aerial coaches mess this one up all the time, which is, I can't stand it. You get somebody and they don't remember what it's like to not be able to organize complex amounts of information. The reason I'm a fairly good aerial coach is because I started when I was like 24 and I didn't know anything. So I very much remember what it was like to be in a room full of ballerinas and not know French words. Make the words not French if the person you're speaking isn't French. Like just simple things like that. Remember how to communicate to people who don't know what you mean already. When you teach, you have to train a bunch of things. The best way to do it is you train individuals, that one-to-one passing on information, one person to one person. It gets more in depth that way. It doesn't always have to be that way. We could also have groups, small groups, 5 to 6 people. We could also have big groups. Train 200 people to do something. You should go through all of these things if you're going to be a really good coach. The point of teaching is that it helps you refine your understanding and refine your communication. If you're talking to somebody and your answer is 10 minutes long for how to do a clean, then you need to make it shorter. The better you get as a coach, the shorter your answers can get. And then you can make your answers longer if you need to. But you don't want to start with an hour-long explanation if you can help it. You want to start with like one sentence. Pick it up, get it to your shoulder, don't drop it on your toes. Something simple like that. And then you can add more information as they get through the first phase. If you're adding so much information, aerialists, I'm talking to you guys specifically. If you're trying to add 32 steps and 87 things to think about on day 1, you're not doing it right. Make it simple, change one thing at a time. We harp on that all the time here because that's actually how you learn, and that is not how most people teach. The other thing with teaching is ego. You kind of have to learn to not be a jackass to be a good teacher. We all know those teachers who are complete jackasses and who treat you like an idiot. Let's try to not be those people ever, and that goes right back to remembering what it's like to suck. If people don't understand you when you're teaching, then you need to figure out how to teach better. Make your communication better, be slower, be calmer, make smaller steps. You can always make smaller steps. If you can't make smaller steps, I mean, there's probably a finite limit to when you can't make smaller steps, but I don't know where it's at. Now that we are back around our triangle, when we compete, we are trying to evaluate ourselves against ourselves or others. Don't take compete as it just has to be compete. Like, it doesn't have to be a jiu-jitsu fight in order for it to be competition. It could also be getting more reps in the same amount of time. If you have a fixed time frame and you know how many reps you do for one specific movement, you can try to get 1 rep more. You can try to compete against yourself every day. We would like to have some outside competition at some point, but you need to start working on that with yourself. Compete against yourself, against benchmarks that maybe other people have. CrossFit has this with Hero Loads where they publish it all across the planet. You can learn what everybody else is doing, and then you try to figure out how to make yourself do those things at the level commiserate with your compatriots. For me, my path to mastery is all of these things. Me making a bunch of YouTube videos about this stuff is me being somewhere between teaching and competing. Because every day I'm talking to a bunch of people and they're asking me questions, and I have to figure out if I'm explaining what I mean in the best possible way or if I can make it better. You'll notice sometimes we make some refining thought videos where there'll be several videos in a row where I figure out that I am not effectively communicating the ideas that I am trying to communicate. So we go back to the drawing board and we try to communicate it better again. The final thing that you can do in order to learn to master any topic is try to learn a bunch more topics. For me, it's kettlebells, heavy club swinging, mace, hydrocore, med ball, slam ball, jiu-jitsu, kung fu, sword, long sword, aerial, trapeze, son of a bitch, silks, not bad, rope, definitely gonna kill you, hoop, not my thing, not my bag. I'm simply not suited for it physically. But you have to do all these things in order to learn what you want to do and how you're going to do it. This applies to everything, whether it's see one, learn, do one, compete, teach one, teach. They're still doing the same exact thing, and this applies to absolutely everything forever. When we think about keep learning new things, think about this, instead of being this way, being this way. So each time you have a triangle and there's a bunch of triangles stacked on top of each other, and the more triangles you stack on top of each other, the better it gets. The faster you go through all the steps. It becomes an upward spiral as you become a better, more competent, more confident, and capable person. I think I'm saying that right. I'm pretty sure I'm saying that right. So learn new stuff, teach new stuff, even if you're not a master yet. You don't become a master without doing the teaching phase, and you have to, at some point, deal with somebody who's non-compliant.